Welcome to another episode of Learning for Truth and Love. Truly thrilled to have our guest, Dr. Pamela Leggett-Robinson. I'm thrilled to talk about this. I just want to say that I did look through your book. Of course, I couldn't resist it. And so I'm excited to ask you some questions about that. It's funny, I was thinking I need to finish reading it to see if there are any hints of me in here.
Yes, there are.
Okay.
All the coaching clients are in there.
Oh my goodness. So I have had the pleasure of knowing Dr. Leggett Robinson, a client as well. And so I'm really excited for you all to get a taste of just the wisdom that I've gained just from knowing you. And so I want to start by having you introduce yourself. And I know you did write, well, not just one book, because you do have a book before this. Your first book was on promotion and tenure, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
this one is on striving for it.
Yeah.
So I noticed the distinction. I was like, wait a second, it's not just promotion tenure, it's striving,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
why don't we start with you telling us about yourself and about your promotion tenure journey that
Okay.
led you to coaching?
Okay. Okay, that's fair. So you know my name already. And so I have a PhD in physical organic chemistry. And so my love was always bench science. But after I had some health issues with my hands, I realized that there was no longer a place for me there working beside my students because I was very hands on. So I got into grant writing and that sort of thing. But I
Oh.
noticed that as I was in my academic career, there was one thing that remained the same, and it was my ability to help people get to the next level.
Mm.
Right. And so I always thought of it as mentoring. And it actually wasn't until I met a young woman and she invited me to come to this camp, if you will. It's
Mhm.
the STEM Leadership Institute. That's what she invited me to come to. And she
Oh.
said, "Yeah, I want you to be a coach." And I was like, "Well, I mentor." She was like, "No, no, no, no. I do want you to mentor, but I want you to coach." And I had no
Oh.
idea what she was talking about. And so um, 6 months before we were entrenched in coaching, she gave us some real evidence based training in coaching and what that was like.
Mm.
And she was like, I want you to always remember what the difference is because there is a very distinct difference between coaching and mentoring. Right.
Hmm.
And most people don't realize that. And so for coaching, like, I don't need to know the subject matter of my client. I don't have to know that. Well, I could actually coach someone that is in aerospace engineering and not once mention aerospace engineering. Like, I don't have to have that background.
Mhm.
Whereas typically, as a mentor that we've always had, right, and especially going through the academic pipeline, it's always been somebody in our area
Mm.
telling us how to navigate that space. And so didn't have to do that. And so it was more peer like also. And so I never looked at my clients as I'm one up from you. It was always very, very peer like. You know, you and I are sharing the exact same space. Whereas with mentoring, it is very much you're here and the mentee's here, right?
Mm.
So that was those two things. And then the thing that blew me away really was that like I really own the process and the outcomes of my client.
Hmm.
And that was the thing that really took me aback because I was like, well, how do I do that? Because that doesn't even make sense to me. And so whereas a mentee would really rely on the direction that the mentor is giving, I don't give direction. I was like, well, how does one do that? And then it was it was crazy because I was sitting there going, right. And during this training, we learned about the different frameworks and we learned about the core competencies. So
Mhm.
there's a very distinct difference between mentoring and coaching. But once I began to fully embrace what those competencies were, like really cultivating trust and really maintaining presence, because, you know,
Mhm.
sometimes you can be talking to somebody and they're like writing away or they're looking away, whatever, but really being in the moment and not having preconceived notions of what the client is going to bring in. And so
Hmm.
that is actually how I got involved with coaching. And so it was after my own promotion and tenure. And I just, you know, promotion and tenure is difficult. But
Hmm.
I'm going to go on record and say it was not difficult for me because for whatever reason it just wasn't. I had wonderful
Mhm.
mentors. I didn't have coaches. I had wonderful mentors that really paved the pathway for me and always had me think about, if I wasn't at this institution, what would the institution look like that I was going to? That
Mhm,
if I was at a 2-year institution, really focusing my credentials on being at a R1.
mhm,
And so that was, that's really how I navigated the space. And it
mhm,
wasn't until after I navigated the space and I had faculty where I really started digging into what that would look like for them. Hence is
mhm,
the first book, right? Demystifying those things. Letting people know, like, there's no one set rule. These are some of the things you can do, but in both books, I think it's undergirded with, you have to stay true to yourself and
mhm,
you have to stay whole in the process. Doesn't matter
mm,
if you get tenure and promotion, if you're a
wow,
basket case when you finish.
right,
So, yeah, so that's kind of how I put both of those together.
wow,
And it's been I love coaching. I love it. I
wow,
love to see how
yourself.
people develop and move forward in their life, whether they stay in the institution or not. Like, it is a beautiful thing to see people realize how wonderful they are.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I could tell you love coaching. I should clarify something. You and I were meeting at a time when you were training, exploring, and you
Yes.
know.
Yes, yes. And it was a scary time for me because even though I had gone through the SLI, evidence-based
Mhm,
training, I was seeking to get the certification. And so you have to get the certification and then you get another certification. So I'm in the process of getting another certification.
mhm,
And so you have to have a certain number of hours. You have to send in the transcripts and the recordings to this entity, to
mhm,
ICF, and they determine whether or not you have met every core competency. And like I said, there's about 8 of them that you
mhm,
have to meet with which each coaching session. And the coaching session it can be 30 minutes to an hour. And that's a lot of stuff to cover, right?
mhm.
In 30 minutes to an hour. And they listen to see your responses as well. So, yeah, it was a thing, but I passed.
I'm like, you know what? Your clients, they turned out okay. So
Yes,
I turned out okay.
it turned out wonderfully.
Wow. So, in thinking about coaching, I'm also thinking of another distinction because I remember even my therapist saying there's a difference between coaching and therapy.
Yes.
And I know you weren't a therapist. Can you give that some of that distinctions?
Yeah. So coaching really is okay. So I also have a therapist. I don't have a coach,
Mhm,
but I do have a therapist. And so we
mhm,
talk about more emotional things. And she may give me insight on those emotional things and give me homework. And a coach does the same. I think the true difference between a coach and a therapist is that I'm not really looking into your psyche per se. Like,
mhm,
I'm trying to help you understand what you are doing. So I'll give you an example. So let's say I have a coachee and they are struggling in tenure and promotion. And every time they literally have a conversation with their department chair, it turns into a full blown argument, let's say. And although, right, the department chair may have said something that is inappropriate, my job as the coach is to help the coachee deal with what was said.
mhm,
How has it made you feel? How can you do something different? What tools can we add to your tool belt so that you don't blow up
mhm,
in the space? So I use that example to differentiate. So a therapist might really be worried about, oh goodness, Catherine, let's make sure that you're okay, that you're safe.
mhm,
That's perfect. I want to help you navigate that space.
mhm,
Whereas a therapist is really looking at you as a person, as an emotional ball. I'm taking that ball and I'm rolling it down the hill. I'm
mhm,
helping roll it. And so I really think that people should actually have both. You
mhm.
should have a therapist, especially if you're going through tenure and promotion. I would say that to anybody, so
Absolutely.
that they can deal with this part and your
Mhm.
heart.
Right.
And then come to me so that I can help you navigate the space once this part is dealt with and once your heart is dealt with.
Mhm,
And then we can see what same things trigger you because the therapist is not really going to ask you that. I'm going to ask
mhm,
you. So, Catherine, how many times has this happened? What makes you go off in the meeting?
mm,
I don't. And then usually the coach will say, I don't know. It's just the way they look. No, literally, what is it?
Yeah.
Then we start peeling the onions back. So when was the first time that happened? Has that ever happened for you before? And when it
Mm.
happened for you, what was the result? Your
Wow.
therapist is usually not going to ask you that question.
Mhm.
They're going to dig, but it's a different lane of digging.
Yeah. Yeah, I have been able to see the distinction. And I do love the fact that the coaching also accompanies some practical solutions,
Yes.
which is nice
Yes.
for those spaces so you
Yeah.
can move forward.
Yeah. The
So it's
solutions
not
that
just
you come
to
up with.
yeah, and that was the key also. The solutions we come up with,
Yeah.
based on the coaching. So I have 1,000 questions, but I'm still thinking about something we talked about a while back in terms
Mhm.
of what led you here. And the reason I am, because I want to talk about the coaching before I talk about the striving for promotion
Mhm.
tenure. The reason it sticks with me is because I remember having a similar conversation with students
Mhm.
who, some surprising things came up. For example, I remember one student who said, and these are students at HBCU, who said when they were in school, whether it's high school or elementary, their peers used to get pulled out for different types of help or therapy and things like that. And she always wondered, like, why aren't we getting help too, right? And
Uh-huh.
she saw her peers going to therapists more, her white classmates. And it wasn't something she just observed in her environment. And then also another similar student, something similar another student said. So I was just curious as to, what are your observations, and experiences that led you to think, well, I really need to go into coaching, right? Or really need to even seek coaching.
Mhm.
Okay. Then talk about why coaching for faculty. Do we need it? Because many of us probably think we don't.
So I think you're right. We do not see coaching. Many of us don't think we need coaching.
Mm.
It's almost like many of us don't think we need a therapist. But, I was talking to somebody yesterday and I was saying, yeah, for me, a therapist is a space where I can just say what I need to say without judgment. Okay, that's fine. Cause sometimes I need to get it out of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same thing with coaching. Like we don't know that we need it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know that sometimes we are the reason that we can't move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that very
Wow.
honestly,
Mm-hmm.
not and that's not based. And so let me also say, and it's not based on what we look like. So it is not based on race, gender, sexual orientation. So like it's not based on that. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not where I'm coming from. I'm literally coming from the place that we don't know what it is about ourselves that are causing us maybe not to move forward. Not saying those other things aren't there.
Mm-hmm.
We can't control those other things. All we can control is us.
Yeah.
And so for me, that makes coaching so much more needed,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because navigating promotion and tenure is hard.
Mm-hmm.
It is hard. And even though they give us that lovely handbook, it's just beautiful. It's how many pages? And it tells us exactly what it wants us to do and how it wants us to do it. It doesn't really tell us how to navigate the space. So, yeah, it does tell us how to do it. So, if we need the scholarly stuff, like we need to do this, this, and this, and we need to make sure that there's this amount of money, how?
Mm.
But it
Yeah.
doesn't teach us or show us how to walk in the space or actually how to leave the space.
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm.
that makes sense.
It does.
And so and so to me, that's where we all need coaching. And I'll also say you made a really important point when you started with the question about how people used to, get pulled out to get, therapy or whatever, but we tend not to be those people. It is literally the same in higher education. It's literally the same in a Fortune 500 company. Coaching is typically for those people that an institution deems to be on the track to the C suite.
Mm.
And so if you
Yeah.
just pause for a minute and think about that language, the
Mm-hmm.
C-suite. So even in higher education, you're talking about those people that are on track, like the institution thinks they're on track to become deans or
Mm-hmm.
provosts or presidents. Those are the people that get executive coaching.
Wow.
And even in like a Fortune 500 company, you can have someone that is a director.
Mhm.
But if the organization sees something in you that says, "Hey, there's a couple of things we need to tweak," right? Then they tap you and then they pay for you to get this executive coaching. So oftentimes we are not pulled out because maybe they don't think that that's the track that we need to be on or that we even want to be on. I'll
Mhm.
put that part in there because I don't wanna always just put it on an external entity.
Mhm.
Sometimes we haven't opened our mouth to say, "Hey, I
Right.
wanna be a provost. How do I get here?"
Mhm. Right, and that's part of the coaching too, right?
Or the coaching.
What you need to be as well. Actually, I'm so glad you said I was actually gonna ask you that question because you did say that. I remember you mentioned that in the introduction. You said that usually the deficient, right, or people who are perceived as deficient,
Mhm.
whether it's in, instruction or so sometimes they're given a coaching or somebody you would accelerate. And I don't know, it didn't quite click that makes so much sense. But the question is, why would you, and I want to position this because it obviously means that coaching is viewed as a good thing, right?
Yes.
For those who are going to move ahead,
Mhm.
right? But
Mhm.
oftentimes, when you perceive yourself to be deficient, you don't necessarily want the coaching,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Like, why? I don't know. I mean, why is that?
I think it's because we have been brainwashed to think anytime we need help, there's a deficiency.
Mm,
If I say, I mean, think about students. If we roll it all the way back to students, if I
mhm,
tell you, "Hey, Catherine, let's can you meet me in office hours? I want to go over a couple problems with you." I
mhm,
see, and usually the person is couching it as like you're deficient, whereas instead of saying, "Hey, I want to help you get to the next level." So sometimes it's a reframe or a rebrand in the words that we use, but
mhm,
oftentimes we're thinking if someone is trying to help us, we are deficient in an area.
mm,
Instead of thinking about it as what can I do to improve? So
mhm,
one is like looking at it from um, a deficient mindset, and one of it is a
mhm.
growth mindset. And
Yeah.
coaching is a growth mindset. And I often think about like that is also a difference between mentoring therapists and coaching. Coaching is always a growth mindset. Everything is around a growth mindset. Everything.
Mhm.
Everything
Yeah.
we talk about. How can you do? So what would
Mhm,
it take for you? What's the first thing you could do?
mhm,
Whereas mentoring typically is like, "Oh, well, you need to do this because I see that you don't have this. You need
mm,
to do more you need to have more publications."
mm.
Instead of, "Okay, so how can I help you get to the next level?"
Right.
Or even in therapy, because my therapist will say, "Well, why did you say that?" "I
Mhm.
don't know, because I felt like it." Which is yet another difference is because in coaching, we do not ask the question why.
Okay.
It's very defensive.
Mhm.
We ask, "How could you?" What? Those types of questions. We do not ask yes or no questions because then it
Mhm.
falls flat, nor do we ask why questions.
Hmm.
And sometimes in the middle of a conversation, you're in the middle of a coaching session, you might say why, and they're like, "Wait, let me ask this question differently."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny talking to you now, bring back some memory. Because, when you're used to seeing a therapist, you're used to them, delving into the feeling, but the
Mhm,
coaching is about, so what are you going to do next in terms of,
mhm,
getting you there? And sometimes, and one of the reasons I value the coaching was
mhm,
because I wanted to get there, right? But sometimes it meant wrestling through what was keeping me here,
mhm.
right? And so I do remember those questions. And you trying to get me from A to B, and then we'd go back, and I was just like, what is she trying to do? I mean, look, and in the end, I realized that that's what she's trying to get me, help me to see. I mean, whatever the outcome was, to get to that
Right.
is a solution of a sort to act. And
Yes.
I'm thinking in hindsight, even when, before I entered into academia, that would have been so beneficial because
Mhm,
I remember seeing a therapist because, I had a situation where, whoever was the principal at the time, he was hostile, right? Let's just say.
mhm,
And the hostility started a little bit kind of suddenly, and I needed to figure out how to think about this, So I really went to see it. I was like, how do I think about this,
Mhm.
And one of the things she always said was, throughout my therapy for different things, don't what would she say? Compare your insides to somebody else's outsides, right? I just remember.
Mm.
But then I never so it helped me to learn how to adapt, but then I could see how it would have been nice to know how I could be proactive,
Right.
if I wanted to be that other person, right?
Mhm.
Rather than shrink back if I wanted to be the confident person, right?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was actually I did a talk this summer with ASEE over coaching. It was about
Mhm,
coaching faculty through tenure promotion. It was primarily focused on Black women, only
mhm.
because that is my own positionality.
Right.
Coaching, goes across, and I have coached other than Black women. Like, I do coach other people.
Mhm,
But in that space, it was really difficult for the audience to grapple around why it's necessary
mhm.
for your assistant professors to have coaching. It was really difficult for them, to the point where they also were asking, well, can't we just train senior faculty to do it? And the answer was unapologetically no, because there's no legal documentation that I sign, right?
Mhm.
That I'm not gonna share the information. It is an
Right.
ethical and moral contract that we sign together, right?
Mhm,
I don't share those things. And even when I was doing the training and I had to send in the the transcript, I had to make sure that in those moments we weren't talking about anything that could possibly be misconstrued, or you felt like somebody could look into your soul, if you will. And so
mhm,
those are some of the things, because when you're in coaching, as when you're in therapy, you are very vulnerable,
mhm.
and I have to
Yeah,
create a safe space for you. And
absolutely.
so if there is a senior person in your institution that is in the same room with you while you are being vulnerable, God only knows what can happen.
Right.
And so that was the whole point in having that conversation and presenting that information. Institutions, if they're really serious about retention for their faculty members, if they're really
Mhm,
serious about moving people along into the C suites, then coaching is very, very important for them. And I would dare say it is also important, regardless if you're in higher education or not. If you
mhm,
are transitioning to a different position, or you want to transition to a different position, or you want to transition out, then you do need to see a coach. And so someone had
mhm,
asked recently, well, what kind of coach are you? And I usually call myself a transition coach. Like, you're transitioning
mhm,
through higher ed, you're transitioning through promotion in or out of higher ed, Fortune
mhm,
500 company, you're transitioning from undergraduate to graduate school, any place in your life that seems more difficult than what it actually, what people would think it would be, that's
mhm.
that's where I sit. That's where I
Wow.
that's where I do the best work.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see that. Yeah, I can obviously testify to that. The importance of coaching in whatever transition you make to make sure it's a healthy transition. Many of us stay in one place. We're staggering, we're drowning,
Yeah.
and we're still staying. And so the question is, how do you do it in such a way that, oh, you're just not upping and quitting, right? But you're understanding not just what lessons need to be learned, how to navigate that, but understanding when is the right time, right?
Mhm.
When is a good time, when is not a good time. But you said something else about institutions, because one of the things I feel like I've really been understanding more and more, right? I'm beginning to, and mostly because I've been doing these being involved in being coached in other
Mhm.
ways, right? Whether it's business coaching,
Mhm.
I'm really understanding the extent to which institutions, are a business, right?
Yes, they are.
Which is why, there's so much goal to dismantle that flow, right? That financial flow with businesses, with that business in particular. But I really do believe that in order for institutions to see the need for coaching for faculty, that they would have to change the goals for faculty. Because really the goals in a lot of ways are for faculty to conform, right? To conform. And we expect this level of conformity while innovating. And a lot of times they're such in contradiction. And that's where it creates this challenge. It creates this, this struggle
Mhm,
because the two doesn't quite go together all the time and not in the ways you think it does.
mhm, mhm.
And so, because our goal is to make sure we create, yes, I could see institutions having this fear that if someone really deal with who they are and they become coachable or their coach, it might empower them too much because that doesn't align with the goal of institutions per se, right? And I say it doesn't align with the goal of institutions because, and I was reading your book too. As a Black woman, we
Mhm.
know that sometimes what we have to look forward to with tenure is, oh, you've done these great accomplishments, you've published, you've done all of this, right? Normally, if you're in a business setting, you're hoping that the next stage will align with your zone of genius, right?
Oh, I love
That
it.
there's something light and beautiful at the end. But more, you've accomplished this, you've done all this. Well, welcome to making sure you serve and you service. Hold your horses there. The goal is to serve and service. Let's take you back to being, even if you want, whether or not you want to be that technician. I'm thinking
Mhm.
of Gay Henderson's book, of course. Even if you want to be a technician, that's what you're going to be for us because that's what we need to make this institution thrive. I had a bunch of questions. I guess talk to us a little bit more about how will this benefit faculty and how will it benefit institutions? Because I really don't see institutions seeing it as beneficial,
Right.
especially when I think of key players. Sorry.
Yeah. No, no, you're fine. I loved how you really put that in perspective. And I believe in the book, I really talk about that whole unicorn situation. And I used to,
Yeah.
you know, when people would call me a unicorn, I would get mad, I'm not a freaking unicorn. Yeah. But no, I am a unicorn. There's only one Pamela Michelle Leggett Robinson. It's just me. There's
Yeah.
nobody else that can do what I do. It may look like it, but we may do it differently. And I think there's two answers to your question. So one, once you understand your why do you want tenure and
Mm-hmm.
promotion? I think that is, and I would never ask that question. I would
Mm-hmm.
say, so what purpose does tenure and promotion serve in your professional life? It's a whole different question than why.
Yeah.
Whole different question. And so then you begin to unpack, and once you have examined that for yourself, I think that opens the door to then how you continue to work in the institution. But you have to answer that question first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have to, because if you don't, you will end up serving the institution instead of serving yourself.
Hmm.
And that, I think that is really the place, that intersection of
Mm-hmm.
not understanding what the purpose is for tenure and promotion for you. And then for the flip side, the institution will always be the institution. It is not going to change. Sooner we reconcile that in our heart, mind, body, soul, spirit, toes, fingertips, the
Mm-hmm.
better off we will be. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. How it services you and how you service it are two different things.
Well.
It services you by providing you a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Yeah.
if you tenure a promotion, depending on the school you're at, because we know some departments are getting cut. But typically, that's a lifelong professional commitment. So it serves you that way.
Mm-hmm.
It does in some institutions give you a platform, big or small, right?
Yeah.
You get to, there are some perks, right? You do get to work with the next generation of innovators.
Mm-hmm.
You do form networks. You do, get to travel if you have, grant funding. We don't probably have that so much anymore, but in the
Mm-hmm.
past,
Yeah.
so it serves us that way. That is the only way it serves us. But we
Mm-hmm.
have to understand the good parts about it that we glean. It is not going to say, hey, Catherine, you've done this great work. Let me
Mm-hmm.
go ahead and move you to this. No, if that's what you're looking for, then that's the wrong reason to be in higher education. And so
Well.
say you have to go back to figure out purpose, your purpose. And I do believe I really talk about that more so in
Mhm,
this book, the second book, than I do
mhm.
in the first book. Because
Yeah.
once the second book is really, like you said, it's really about striving. It's really about, as the title says, when it's all said and done, have you made decisions that are best for you?
Mhm.
Not for the institution, not for your family, not for anybody else. Have you made decisions that are best for you? And
Mm.
that is the hardest part, I think, of coaching
Mhm.
is having clients think about themselves
Mhm.
and their purpose in every area of their life.
Mhm.
That is the hardest part for clients is
Yeah.
really just taking a beat and actually being quiet for just a minute. And we sat in silence for a while. I'll
Mm.
sit there as long as you sit there. I'll sit there with you. I'll wait.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, wow. I think wow, where do I begin? When you said something that struck me because it's something I've been observing, being with peers as well. And even, looking at studies. There is this, being an individual versus being an institution.
Hmm.
Sometimes I meet individuals they're so shrouded in institution thinking that you don't really know who they are,
Hmm.
right? I'm not sure that they know who they are as well, because we've used these institutions to hide behind, right, and to gauge and to measure ourselves, and I can imagine a lot of people are going through that crises, right? We're not.
Yeah.
This is not really an adequate measuring stick now because things are falling apart a bit. So where am I? Who am I? And what's going on? It's interesting because I could imagine that it will benefit the institution to have individuals that have a healthy sense of self, right? That's what I'm imagining. I mean, can you talk to that? Because I still don't see institutions being convinced about this benefit,
Yeah.
right? That's why I keep probing on this because
Yeah.
I really think that it would have been amazing to have you there going through the process itself,
Yeah.
and to understand, because there is argument. Yes, we'll do it. Yes, we, in terms of tenure for or
Hmm.
whatever. But I really think that we need to come to grips of it for it ourselves because I don't think institutions understand that, when we're in a position where our identity, right, and our self is not healthy and assured,
Hmm.
it's also not beneficial to them.
Correct.
So can you talk a little bit about that? I mean,
Mhm.
if you're convincing institutions that
Right.
us being healthy is good for them,
Right. And so when you say us,
Mhm.
who are we referring to? So that I'm clear.
Faculty,
Faculty,
faculty, yeah, researchers, staff.
researchers, staff. And that's a really good question because it is difficult to get them to understand the importance of coaching and getting people through.
Like, what's a situation where us not being healthy is not good for them,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
not being that coachable space,
Mhm.
and us being healthy is good for them.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, not being healthy is actually, from a business perspective, it leads to faculty being sick, faculty taking leave, faculty taking FMLA,
Mm.
faculty resigning. And what institution and HR could probably answer this better than a provost or a president or a dean.
Mhm,
A department chair would probably have a better idea. When faculty are out continuously and then their health declines and they leave, there is so much money that has to be spent in replacing the faculty member.
mm,
So for every faculty member that leaves because of a physical or emotional illness, the institution picks up that tab.
mhm,
And people say, well, it's not that expensive. Oh, but it is because it takes 12 months to literally search, find, and put a faculty member in place. 12 months. Because
mhm,
you do have to write the job description. You do have to have at least 3 people that, applied. Then you
Mhm.
go through the whole process of, okay, you've got this interview, then this interview, then this interview, right? And so it is a 9 to 12-month endeavor.
Mhm.
The human resources that are spent, and when I say human resources, I do not mean the department, I mean the time that it takes
Mhm.
away from faculty doing faculty jobs, department chairs and deans and provosts or what have you, is ridiculous. It
Mhm.
is ridiculous the amount.
Mhm.
So if
Wow.
we're talking about it just from a monetary perspective,
Right.
it's in the best interest of the institution to help faculty get through promotion and tenure. Think about it. As an assistant professor, it takes you what, 5 years, right, to move to the next level.
Mhm.
So in 5 years, the institution has invested money in you. And so now it doesn't work and I got to start over.
Mhm.
The salary that they were paying that assistant professor, let's say assistant professor A, that is not going to be the same salary that they have to then start over with because each year the salary increases.
Mhm.
But it increases for recruitment, but it doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily increase for in-house faculty.
Mhm.
So we're talking about from a business perspective, like
Wow.
why would that be best? That's one
Mhm.
reason, finances. The second reason is really about the students.
Mhm.
Who is going to take over the lab space? How much money are they going to be able to bring in? Because if Professor A, assistant professor, is doing well, right? But there's something about, and I've seen it happen, there's something with the something that they don't like, right?
Mhm.
But this professor has brought in $1 million+.
Mhm.
Once that professor leaves, typically that money leaves too
Mhm.
and that it goes someplace else. So now
Mhm.
you've lost, once again, the financial, the monetary thing. But you've also lost some of the students because I do know, and I've seen it happen,
Mhm.
especially when we're talking about graduate students.
Yeah.
If you have a faculty member that has a graduate research group, right? If they decide to leave and go someplace else, guess who else goes? Their students.
Mhm.
And so
Right.
now you no longer get that. So
Mhm.
you've lost innovation, you've lost monetary, you've lost students. And with students come fees. It's all about money. I guess that's really what I'm trying to say. So if
Yeah.
institutions would begin to think about it in terms of a business, which they do in some points, but then some points with faculty, they don't. So they think about
Mhm.
business in terms of students and enrollment,
Yeah.
students and retention, but it's rare that they think about it in terms of faculty.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
so I love football, but I do. I really love college football. Not so much NFL, but I watch NFL now because I follow the players. I do.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to me because players follow their coach and even in basketball. So
Mm.
I was watching NCAA last year and I've always been, and somebody's gonna say, I can't believe she said that. I've always been a Coach Cal fan from Kentucky. Always been.
Mhm.
And it was amazing to me when he left Kentucky. Yeah, he didn't have some good seasons. I do get that. But his players went on to do great things. But when he
Mm.
left Kentucky and he went to Arkansas, that team went with him. So going back to coaching,
Mhm.
and just think how much money they lost.
Mhm.
They had to pay Coach Cal out his contract.
Mhm.
But then they lost part of that NIL money, that institutional money that was going to the players, like players were bringing in. So now
Mhm.
Arkansas has that money. So it's kind of
Mhm.
the same thing with coaching, like people
Mm.
coaching, real life, everyday people coaching. It's the same thing in
Mhm.
higher ed. So you have a faculty member that's doing well, and then something happens and they're not, and they decide because the institution is not treating them well, I'm going to pack my toys up and I'm going to leave. And
Mm.
so that's the harm that can actually come to the institution. The other
Mhm.
harm, if you don't have people that look like the students, then that's harmful as well, because then why
Mhm.
would I go there as a student?
Mhm.
And I know people are like, well, you're just talking about faculty of color. No, I'm also talking about women because in chemistry, we tend to gravitate to departments where there's a woman, or if there's not
Mhm.
another faculty member in there in that
Mhm.
department, that's a
Yeah.
woman. If there's no women, it's hard. It's just hard.
Yeah.
So it impacts the institution on so many different levels. But I would say from a business perspective,
Mhm.
military level, if anything, and getting them, and it's not the institution that you have to change the mindset. It's the gatekeepers, i.e., department chairs and
Mhm.
deans.
Yeah.
You could change the mind of the provost. The president is out raising funds
Mhm.
and you can speak to the provost, but the provost is not really going to listen to somebody like me unless
Mhm.
there is an ally within department chair or dean. But you mentioned something, and I thought it was really interesting. You mentioned the fact that sometimes there's no individualism, like people wear the institution
Mhm.
and they can't think past that. And so, if they could think past that, then they could understand what is needed.
Mm.
We begin to put on the clothing of the institution, and that's all we think we are.
Mhm.
Which is, and I've done some talks where we have to introduce ourselves. And I tell people, I want you to introduce yourself, but I don't want you to use the title. I don't want you to use the name of the school.
Mhm.
Just tell me, introduce yourself.
Mhm.
And it's the hardest thing for faculty members to do
Mhm.
because they are so clothed with, I work at this R1 and I do this and my research is that. I don't care. I
Mhm.
don't care, and really nobody else does either. You're the only one that cares about that. Let's
Well.
talk about something of substance. Let's really, I mean, so
Mm.
even if someone asked you what you did, like, it's like, it doesn't have to be my research is this. Like, I broaden participation or I help people realize their dreams.
Mhm.
Like, that is such a better way of describing what one does instead of, well, I teach students how to write curriculum. What does that really mean? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So there's so more that goes into that. Like, what is the outcome of that? What is the impact of what you do? And that's the place that you start to say,
Mhm.
that's what you do. It's the impact.
Right.
And because institutions, and I go back to, it's not the president and it's not the provost. It's really
Mhm.
that middle management. It's really the department chairs and it is really the deans that hold the power to do
Mhm.
coaching, have coaching within their departments.
Mhm. Well,
Yeah. Hopefully I haven't gone too far off the beaten path because as you can see, I get real passionate about that because it's
I
very
appreciate
important. It's very important.
Absolutely. I want to see all your passion. It is important.
It is.
I keep coming back to this because the question is,
Mhm.
I guess I'm trying to reconcile it with, even my own observations,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Why would an institution want that? Helping them to understand how
yeah,
this is beneficial,
yeah.
because having us be healthy, being able to navigate healthily, I think that I can see, and you can correct me, from my observation, I could see wanting to control
Oh,
faculty.
yeah. Oh, yes.
Being right and the thought of losing control,
Mhm,
right? And thinking that that's healthy and not really understanding the role of empowerment because a
mhm.
faculty who is not empowered can't go empowering other students because they
They
don't really
can't.
understand what that is. So go ahead, sorry.
And so it is, I love how you put that because also, so I talked about, like, why should they do it? But then you mentioned, not empowering faculty. But when you yourself are not empowered, then it's hard to empower anybody else. And so if a department chair
Mhm.
or a dean or whomever does not feel empowered, then it's impossible to empower another faculty member. I
Mhm.
also always think about the fact that those people that are oppressed oftentimes oppress others.
But they think
Not
they're empowering them. Sorry, go
what
ahead.
you say? What you say?
I said they think they're empowering them.
I think, but once again, if you don't understand, you're simply doing what has been done to you, and you think
Mhm.
that that's okay,
Mhm.
right? And no one has pulled you aside and said, "Hey, we could do something different," because you are so entrenched in the tradition of the ways in which the institution has served you,
Mhm.
that you serve others. Like, you think that that's really the right way to do it. And
Mhm.
so getting people to shift, I would say, yeah, coaching is great for faculty members because it does give you, it does empower you to make a decision to go or stay. And it helps you to figure out how I can move within this space and still keep Pamela intact. I don't have to quietly quit. I can still keep doing what I love to do in these four walls, right? I can still do that. You
Mhm.
may not look like what you think it's going to look like, but I can still do it.
Mhm.
But I also think that maybe department chairs and deans also need some coaching so that their mindsets can change because it's about that mindset, right? Really showing them what it looks like to see someone healthy and thrive and
Mhm.
someone not so much.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, Catherine, I'm thinking oftentimes they can't see the difference because the person that's not thriving leaves or shirks, shrinks, just doesn't move forward. They just
Mm.
don't.
Yeah.
And so the person that they have empowered
Mhm.
does well, and it's a constant. So they're only looking for the shiny. They're not
Mhm.
looking for it holistically. And
Mm.
so in order for them to see it, yeah, you do have to do some comparative studies. They're not going to do that. I think their mindset has to change. What does a healthy faculty member look like? That would be a great
Mhm.
question to do a focus
Mhm.
group with some dean and some department chairs. I'm just curious. Like, could you tell
Mhm.
me what a healthy faculty member looks like? And you would be surprised at what their answer is. Yeah.
I would.
God, I would love to do that.
I don't know. I'm making some predictions in my mind already.
Yeah, and then maybe then you have a group of faculty and you ask them the same question, and then you do a gap analysis to see the difference.
Mm.
This is how do we merge? How do we get these more aligned? I'm sorry, I went into an evaluation space. Okay, back to the coaching, but
No,
they
no, it's
they
okay.
go hand in hand, actually.
I'm in a different space to thinking because I can't help but, I keep coming back to this a business model, right?
Yeah.
And I keep thinking, okay, so you're talking about management.
Mhm.
When so you have your executives, you have your management,
Mhm.
and in the business setting, right, where there's earnings and things like that, the folks under you, is if they're doing well, and whatever that well means, I guess that's a good question. What does
Mhm.
well mean? Especially when knowledge production benefits the faculty, right? And maybe it's perceived as benefiting the faculty more than is perceived as benefiting the chair and the dean,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
not having our development,
Mhm.
be directly, I don't want to say tied, but be directly necessarily impacting.
Yes.
Because as an institution, we like to say that, but that's not what happens in practice, right?
No, not at that level. It does not.
Not at that level. But, when I think about an executive, when I think about a business kind of model, I'm thinking also whoever's under you,
Mhm.
if they're productive, innovative, you're hoping it would be beneficial, right? But
Correct.
what I've observed is a lot of in a lot of institutions. Some institutions haven't really even created that infrastructure where that could be beneficial to
Oh.
both, right? There's a stagnation
Huh?
in that environment. And I keep thinking that if you have an individual getting the help, the coaching, who instead of bottling everything, we can continuously deal with it so nothing explodes later on, right? Um and I'm also thinking, when I say institution, I'm thinking not just universities, I'm thinking funders. I'm thinking,
Yeah. Yeah.
there is this stagnation, there is this thinking of wanting everything to be the same in some ways, right?
Yeah.
That is so counterproductive
It is.
to actual development, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So it is counterproductive. So the standing joke is that it takes forever to get anything done in higher education or education in general. And so the counterproductivity stood out for me because if we think about the counterproductivity stood out as well as the impact on faculty that aren't well on
Mhm.
department chairs, right? Or deans or whomever that management level is. If we think about what happens when departments don't function well, it is detrimental to the overarching college or to the institution.
Mhm.
It is detrimental. Think about like you can't, this is possibly why faculty senate is so contentious.
Mm.
This is why, no, seriously, this is why
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah.
department and department chairs are just so nasty.
Mhm.
All goes back to this piece of being unproductive because you
Mhm.
can't be unproductive as a department chair when your faculty are not well,
Mm.
but you don't have the wherewithal to understand how to help because you are wearing the institution as your shield. So, like I said, it also shows up in faculty senate where you
Uh-huh.
have these meetings that should literally take, an hour, two at best, and they're going well into the evening
Mhm.
because they are not well and their
Mhm.
department chairs haven't taken the time to see about them. And I guess, and I'm just going to speak about me. So when I was a department chair, like I really cared about my faculty. Like, for our performance reviews, I would literally have them, write up your performance review, send it to me 24 hours, 48 hours in advance so we can actually have a conversation.
Mhm.
Please block off an hour and a half to 2 hours for the conversation. I wanna know what you're doing in here and at the institution and outside. And so there were many times I would have
Mhm.
conversations with staff and especially staff, right,
Mhm.
that had vacation, and I will have pulled their vacation and seen how on edge they may have been and how they snap. So when was the last time you took vacation?
Mhm.
And have those conversations. How can I help you enjoy what you're doing?
Mm.
And so maybe I guess at that point I had started coaching and didn't realize it, but you have to, as a department chair and as a dean, like, you actually have to give a damn
Mhm.
about people. And so I think that answers your question. Like, you got to give a damn about the people that you are serving and that are serving you. If you don't care, this is what happens.
Mhm.
And I think we're seeing that. I think we were seeing it. I think we are seeing it. But I think in this season of chaos,
Mhm.
people are starting to think more about humanity of others,
Mm. Yeah.
because at the end of the day, the institutions can't survive unless they begin thinking about the humanity of their faculty, their humanity of
Mhm.
their students. Now, you're going to have some that they're just going to keep floundering and think that that's going to work. But those institutions that are really thinking about how this season is affecting not only their bottom line, but how they move forward, those are going to be the institutions that you see flourish in the next season, because they have had to stop for a minute and think about, how are we going to do this? How are we going to renegotiate tenure and promotion when
Mhm.
our faculty can't get NIH grants anymore?
Mhm.
Because everybody can't do the same work. So how now are we going to say this person is valuable? What other human traits should they
Mhm.
have? How do they give back to the students? How do they give back to their community? And maybe it's going to be a shift in the paradigm of teaching, research, and service.
Wow.
Maybe it will be equal, or maybe one will be more than the other. But I don't think in this season coming up, I don't think that the push for scholarship,
Mhm.
and I say scholarship in terms of research grants, is going to be as high. So we're going to have to start
Mm-mm.
thinking about people.
Mhm.
And I dare say this is the time where coaching could really, really be helpful to
Yeah.
move people forward, and to then kind of recalibrate, if you will,
Mhm.
what's important for
Wow.
institutions in terms of faculty, what's important, department chairs, what should you be looking at instead of this?
Mhm.
Because people can, I mean, it's not ideal, but people can always leave.
Right.
Love this conversation.
And then they'll encounter the same thing at another institution after they
Right,
leave,
and maybe, and so that's the other part, right?
or might be better. Go ahead.
It could be, but I think,
Mhm.
when I had graduate students, one of the things I would always tell them is, yeah, check out the institution. Check it out.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know this person is doing the great research that you love to do.
Mhm.
Check out the group. Okay, well, I went to visit. I'm going to visit. So when you go visit, I want you to talk to the people in the group in front of other people, but I also want you to talk to people outside the group.
Mm.
Because what an institution shows you can sometimes be smoke and mirrors.
Mhm.
You need to talk to the people inside the
Mhm.
institution. What does that look like to work there?
Mhm.
And not just in the department, like, really ask those hard questions. So
Absolutely.
before we jump ship,
Mhm.
we need to be clear about our purpose. And I keep going back to that. Like, we need to be clear about what we want to give to the institution.
Mhm.
Notice I said what we
Mhm.
want to give to the institution,
Right. Absolutely.
and give that.
Wow. That's so important because what we might want to give the institution might not want.
Exactly. And so you really have to be mindful of that. And that's why I say,
Mhm.
understand what your purpose is, understand what you're willing to give.
Mhm.
Because if we really think about tenure and promotion, even if you're giving what you want, you're giving up something.
Mhm. Yeah.
You've got to give up something. There's 24 hours in a day. I don't know,
Mhm.
maybe you have 30. I have 24. And I try to sleep 8. I try. I do try. I try very, very hard. But even with that, it's only so much you can give
Mhm.
until you've given yourself away and there's nothing. And I think that's where the coaching once again comes back in, because even if I know that this is a place that might work for me, I also know that I'm going to have to give up something. So by God, it
Mhm.
better be worth me losing those 2 hours of sleep. So I'm getting
Mm.
6 instead of 8.
Wow.
But then there's only so long I can do that as well. So what am I
Mhm.
willing to give? And am I going to get back what I need? And if
Mhm.
I'm not, then I need to make a transition.
Wow.
And it may not be a physical transition out, it may be a transition in how I move in the space.
Yeah. Wow. I was gonna comment on what you said, but I wanted to mention something to you. Whenever there are times when I don't, let me just say, I don't have the discipline to stick to set boundaries for my space. I think about you. I think about you. Dr. Leggett Robinson only knows that, I
No,
didn't.
it's an everyday thing, and
It is.
coaching is not a one-stop shop, right? A good coach will give you tools that you can use long after the sessions are over.
Absolutely.
And I'm thankful that you still hear my voice back
I
there.
do, I do. I can't help it. Imagine I was like, okay, I'm gonna set boundaries for that one day, you
Mhm,
know.
mhm.
And then I picture you saying, "What's stopping you now?"
Right.
I want to say this because you had mentioned several things, like you asking staff, about vacation, and I really want to clarify. You're doing it to be
Mhm.
helpful to them, right? Not to control.
Yep.
And again, I'm saying this intentionally because, I could picture someone say, "Oh, I can ask," but their motives are different, right?
Correct.
And I've even seen situations where, you've had department chair or even dean where, or even, talk to other people where they've hampered, or even, that faculty from moving ahead.
Mhm.
So I'm just thinking, well, coaching would be so important for understanding our own behavior, especially needing to understand how we move forward, how we move forward from a certain way of thinking as people, as you mentioned as well, and as a lot of research shows, sometimes the oppressed becomes the oppressor, right? Or
Mhm.
we have situations where we need to decolonize our own thinking and our own behavior. Because I've seen with the best of intentions, people say the exact same things you said. We
Mhm.
need to reassess and we need to do this. But because they themselves are unhealthy,
Right.
it's implemented in unhealthy ways and in the worst ways for everyone,
Yeah.
right? They think that they're doing the same thing someone else does, but
Right.
will never take responsibility for those results,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know? And so I think that's where coaching comes in. But the question is, if an institution were to do coaching, if an institution were to healthily implement coaching,
Mhm.
right, in a way that's good for faculty, good for people, good for,
Mhm.
for administrative leaders, good for
Mhm.
staff. What would that, and wasn't used to control and
Right.
wasn't used as a mechanism to manipulate,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Because I
Mhm.
am concerned about,
Mhm.
when or if things settle, how would we work to mend, right? Or
Right.
heal? That's a big concern because
Yeah.
I've seen how sometimes with the best of intention, right? What would that look like for an institution?
Well, I think first of all, you would really have to lay down some ground rules and how you were going to implement it and how you were going to use it. I think good intentions, as my mother would say, lead the pathway to hell. Like sometimes they just do
Yeah.
because you haven't set out like what is the end goal,
Mhm.
right? Is the end goal to get in somebody's business? Because
Mhm.
there are people like that would like to do that. Oh, I just want to find out what's going on. Why they that's not the whole point in coaching. That
Mhm.
that really is not. The point in coaching, the overall part of coaching is to make sure that individual is healthy and can move forward in a positive direction, can make decisions that are best for them.
Mm.
And so, in order to implement that in a way that is healthy, that's not mean and nasty, for lack of a better word, it has to start from the top. You would have to really have coaching for the deans. You'd have to start there so that they could begin to unpack their stuff.
Mhm.
And then you would have it for department chairs so they can unpack because they can't. they wouldn't be able to understand coaching unless they're a part of it. It's almost like being in a club. Like if you don't, you have a preconceived notion of what something is,
Mhm.
but unless you're in it, you can't really say too much. Like you can, okay, I think this is what coaching is.
Mhm.
But let me engage in it so that I can see what it is and I can see how it benefits me. Because if I see how it benefits me, then I can see how it can benefit my faculty. So you have to
Mhm.
start from the top and go down. You cannot start bottom up. Like this is one instance
Mhm.
where
Mm.
bottom up is not going to be served.
Mm. I'm so
It
glad you
just is not, and I do believe in, top down, bottom up. Like, I do believe there are points in an institution where one has to come and the other has to. I do believe in that strongly,
Mhm.
but coaching is a place where it has to be top down.
Mm.
It has to be. And I've actually had a provost that has helped me with some publications where she has seen how beneficial coaching is, but she also talks about the uncoachable faculty member. So she
Mhm.
understands how beneficial it is to help to coach faculty through. But she
Mhm.
herself has an executive coach. You see what I'm saying? Like she has been
Right.
coached herself, so she understands the difference. So in order for it to get to that point where people aren't doing anything for ill-gotten gain, right? And they're just not being nasty and the implementation is good and it's well intended and the well intention is equal to the outcomes, they have
Mhm.
to be coached.
Wow.
So we're gonna have to start like that's at the top. We gotta start there.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow.
Because think about it. I mean, you can't, it's difficult for you to tell somebody about whitewater swimming,
Mhm.
whitewater rafting, let's just say. I
Mhm.
don't whitewater raft, but let's just say. It would be difficult for me to talk about how important it is to get instruction before whitewater rafting to someone who- who's getting ready to whitewater raft and has never seen it. You know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
very difficult to tell you how important this very thing is. You've not experienced it. Because if you haven't experienced it, then you might be thinking, "Oh, no one needs this." I mean, think about it. Like that's where we are in higher ed, and I
Mhm.
think that's why coaching has not moved forward. And it's crazy because there are coaches that are academic coaches for students. So you see how important it is for them, but yet you still don't see how important it is for faculty.
Mm.
But the people that know that it's important for students have been coached.
Mhm.
They get it. We just haven't coached the faculty and deans and those sorts of folks so that they can understand it too.
Right. Well, I guess if this persuades anyone, I love where you talked about, that when they see the potential in someone, they do choose coaching as a
Yeah.
preparation mechanism. And there's a reason. I would
Yeah.
love for you to, I know that we're going to wrap up soon. And it looks like we're going to need to do a follow up to talk more about this book. But
That's
I
fine.
still want to talk about it because you can see my marker in
I
here.
see.
I did highlight quite a few areas. I'm a slow reader because I
You're
tend to
supposed to.
live in a place for a while.
Yes.
So tell us about this when it's all said and done.
Yes.
And I love the fact that you have a workbook. I have spent enormous amount of money on coaching, and
Uh-huh.
I love the fact that you've wrapped some of it in here. So tell us about this and how faculty would benefit from this, and even mention your last book as well. I don't know if you
Yeah.
have it.
Yeah, I do actually have the first book. There it is.
Awesome.
And it's very different. I mean, they're probably the same size. I would say one is might be a little bigger than the other.
Mhm.
The second book, though, is really about the individual. As I said, the first book,
Mhm.
Demystifying a Promotion and Tenure,
Mhm.
was really more about how can a person make inroads in this navigation without losing themselves, but
Mm.
playing by the rules.
Mm.
That's really the first one, like, staying
Mhm.
whole. I didn't put playing by the rules, but there are parts in here, like, I talk about celebrating you, which is a theme, crossing the finish line, but one of my favorite ones in here is really about perfection.
Mm.
And yeah, perfection and also using your professional network, like
Mhm.
not your professional network, but your professional organizations, time management. Really, those three areas I think were the strongest. So when we talk about perfection and procrastination,
Mhm.
was actually thinking about a friend of mine when I wrote it. So let me just say
Mhm,
the 2 books are based on the newsletter.
mhm,
So I have a monthly newsletter that comes out and people can subscribe to it. All you gotta do is follow me on IG, PLR_consulting. You can follow me there or LinkedIn
mhm,
and you can subscribe to the newsletter. And so for each book, I have literally taken the newsletter and just expanded it
mhm.
and added more references. For the second book, I've actually added coaching, informal coaching, so that you don't have to necessarily, if your institution doesn't pay for a coach or you can't afford a coach, like this is a good introduction to what coaching with me would look like
Okay.
informally. Not all the way, but just giving you a kind of taste. And that's why there's a workbook there.
Mhm,
The questions that are in the book are the same questions that are in the workbook. And you mentioned that it takes you a while to get through a book. And this book, the second one, is not for you to rush. It is
mhm,
literally for you to take your time, spend
mhm,
time with yourself, right? Answering the questions and really seeing how you maneuver and how you are kind of traversing the space.
mhm,
Whereas the first one, like I said, really gives you the how to's and some of the things to consider. Procrastination and perfection, like we get stuck in it having to be perfect and then we can't move on and we miss deadlines all the
mhm,
time because it has to be perfect. I have a girlfriend and she edits as she writes, like it never gets done. She edits as she writes, it never gets done.
mhm,
And then using your professional organizations, like that is such a place. Like I could just coach people through that, to be honest with you. Your
mhm,
professional organization is a great place to try out stuff.
mhm,
Like I'm a part of the American Chemical Society and I'm part of the Georgia local section, but I hold a couple of offices on the national level as well. But it has given me an opportunity to write what they call innovative project grants, where you
mm,
just come up with something that might sound crazy, you write it up, and more than likely they'll fund it. So when I was
mm,
a professor at Tuskegee, two of my colleagues and I thought about a science program on Saturdays for underserved rural kids. We
mhm,
wrote it in an hour, maybe, got funded 3,500
mm.
blank. I mean, and it got to be so big, Catherine. Like
Wow,
people were putting us on their proposals because it
that's
was
awesome.
outreach and
Mhm,
we did so much good work.
mhm, that's
Little
awesome.
stuff like that, like and that was at
Mhm,
Tuskegee. I've written a couple while being in Georgia, but little stuff like that, like you get to run for office, you get to see bylaws, you get to see those governance things that happen in a small sector, and now
mhm,
you can use that same experience and put it in your faculty work,
mhm.
because even though it was $3,500, it's still a grant.
Yeah.
It still counts. And then the time management. And I remember as a department chair, I had faculty, especially women and men too, that had small children and wanted to move up. And so
Mhm,
one of the things in the first book I talk about is actually figuring out what you're going to get a grade in. Because you can't make
mm,
all A's. Everybody doesn't make honor roll all the time. And if they are, they're batshit crazy at the end of the semester. Most
mm,
people. So you have to pick and choose what are you comfortable with in getting a B or a C. But
mhm,
this is for that semester. You can be comfortable with it. It's okay. You don't have to make honor roll all the time. You can get principals lists. It's all right. And so getting faculty to remember that is really
mhm.
what went into this first book.
Okay,
The second book, that one.
okay. So, okay, I wanna read the whole title because
Okay. That's my
I
baby.
think
This
it's
is my
really
baby.
interesting. Go ahead.
Reflections, when it's all said and done, reflections for Black women striving for promotion and tenure in higher education.
Okay.
And like I said, although it is written from this space, it can be used for anyone in
Mhm,
any space. And it doesn't have to be higher education. And no, you do not have to be a Black woman, but some of the questions are really based on intersectionality. But this is my baby. Like this, the first one was great. This one, I think, really you hear my voice in it.
mhm,
So anyone that knows me, when you read, you hear my voice. The foreword is by one of my great friends, Dr. Kelly Mack, who introduced me to coaching. And so the book is just, yeah. And then you have the whole journal. And so for
mhm.
each question, like you have time and space to think about what your answer is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry, I love the way you structured it, first of all,
Okay.
especially since we're in the age of most people sometimes listening to Audible. It's structurable in such a way that it's easy on the eyes to know, and you have a lot of different categories and, highlighted titles so that people know where they're getting to, right? And so, yeah, so it's very reader friendly. That was important because I think these days a lot of people are thinking, well, seriously, when you're faculty, you're always reading things, it's
Yes.
sometimes it makes it hard to pick up a different book. So
Yes.
so tell us, how this will benefit faculty, right?
Mhm.
Especially when you talk about striving because which means your book has to do more or less what the internal workings, what's going on
Yeah.
internally. Do you mind if I read the title of the first chapter?
No, go ahead.
When I look at the first chapter, nothing and no one goes unchanged, right?
Mhm.
So what should faculty expect and how will this benefit them? Okay, and how do you recommend they read through this
Okay.
and do the workbook?
Right. So how would benefit them? Well, as the title says, nothing and no one goes unchanged. So with each chapter, with
Hmm.
each portion of the chapter, you will be changed.
Hmm.
I'm not changing you. You're going to change yourself because your thoughts will change. And that's what coaching is really about. And so this is more informal coaching,
Hmm.
right? So I've thought very deeply about the questions.
Hmm.
And the questions, like, so it talks about in the very beginning how I come to coaching and the different frameworks that I use because I don't want people to think that coaching is just at the top of your head. You just
Hmm.
throw out questions. No, they're very specific. Like I said, they're competencies, but there's also frameworks that we use. And
Hmm.
I typically base all my coaching on it's framed in Black feminist epistemology because
Hmm.
it does center voice. And it also uses Gestalt, which is Gestalt really has the person understand that they are not their environment
Hmm.
and that it's okay for them to be themselves.
Wow.
And then you also have Piaget, which is adult learning. So it
Hmm.
actually comes from like coaching comes from an academic space. I guess that's what I want to say.
Yeah.
It's a very academic space. And so as you go through each chapter, each portion of the chapter, you're going to be changed. Your thoughts are going to expand. You will develop a growth mindset,
Mm.
especially from beginning to end. Now, how you should read it, how you should work it, that's a really good question. I don't think anybody's asked me that. You can go through it, in chronological order because it is based
Mhm.
on the academic year, which is crazy, right?
I would recommend chronology, you're right.
Or you can look at it and see, what chapter resonates with you.
Mhm.
And the beauty in the book also is that there are quotes all throughout the chapter. So for
Mhm.
every chapter, there's a quote. For every subchapter, there's a quote. And
Mhm.
there's also, for your listening pleasure, there is a playlist. So as you
Ah.
finish the chapter, you can actually download the playlist. I think it's on iTunes, Spotify, one of them, and listen to the music. And so that's also a
Wow.
good way to do it. And we are thinking about doing an audiobook,
Mhm. You
but
should.
we're really thinking about it. So we'll have to, I don't know what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
My team is like, "You'll be the one reading," and I'm like, "Oh gosh, you really don't want me to read." But that's probably the next phase because
Mhm.
I love an audiobook, to be honest with you, but I also love the journal part, so it will just literally be the book and maybe some questions, and I'll say, "Well, now take your time to go
Mhm.
through the journal and answer the questions." So it's not an assignment
Right.
for you at your leisure to
Yeah.
answer the questions. And so that's how you should do it. Um,
Wow. It's a lot to think about here. You have chapter titles and you have subtitles. I
yeah,
think there's just a lot that people can use, which is awesome.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
a lot that people can.
I think I think my favorite is the last part. Like, you have
Yeah.
the chapter and then you have the very last piece.
Uh-huh.
That is actually my very favorite. Because I love the little so as an evaluator, we always come up with themes, right? So you can see the work as an evaluator within the book as well. It's
Mhm.
the theme titles like the sprinkles on cupcakes and things of that nature, which
Yeah.
one would say, "How does that even fit into coaching?" But once you get the book and you read it, you'll
Mhm.
really be able to see how it makes perfectly good sense, especially
Yeah,
that piece. Yeah.
absolutely. And you have the imagery and the coaching questions.
Yes.
Um, so I won't give away any more.
No more.
This is awesome. Thank you so much. If you like this episode, please like and follow for future episodes. And we certainly will have to have Dr. Leggett Robinson back here to talk more about her book. And there's just a lot to talk about.
Yes, well, thank you for the opportunity and the time and space to share. If you're an assistant professor or you're thinking about going into higher ed or you're thinking about what you're going to do afterwards or just getting ready to start your tenure track, just really consider the book and really consider me. I would love to
Yeah.
help you in this space.
Awesome. And I think, of course, not I think, she will do a fantastic job in that space for sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for being here. I'm going to stop.